Hey 915 Talk listeners, it's finally happening. 915 Talk is now playing, as of today, from Monday through Friday, 4 to 5 p.m. I'm super excited for both today's episode and the coming weeks and months as we learn to love our city, love our neighbor, and give God all the glory. Today we'll be hearing from Shaun Overton, who has bought 320 acres of wasteland between Sierra Blanca and Van Horn, and he's turning it into a desert forest. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I hope that you'll listen through it, and let's learn to love our city. Let's learn to love the desert and love our neighbors and give God all the glory. This is 915 Talk.
915 TALK.
The world is looking at El Paso.
What will we say to the world? From the KELP studio in El Paso, this is 915 Talk.
And now your host.
Good afternoon, beautiful citizens of the borderland. This is 915 Talk, and I am your host, Andy Frecka. We are broadcasting from the heart of the world's largest borderplex, the KELP studios here in El Paso. And today we have Mac Daddy Del Norte on the board. Mac Daddy, how are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. You know what I've been thinking about, Mac Daddy?
No, I don't know what you've been thinking about.
I've been thinking about starting a YouTube channel. What do you think?
Oh, I'm down for that. Definitely.
So let's say we wanted to start a YouTube channel and get millions of views.
Okay.
What kind of YouTube channel would you start?
Man. Well, in my area of expertise, it's either something that people are interested in, which is technology, music, sports.
Okay.
You know, around that line.
Okay. I would probably rent a helicopter and then jump into a giant swimming pool of Jello.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
I mean, that's how we're going to get our millions of views. Okay. So
Okay.
I would have to have divers in the Jello to pull me out so that I'm safe.
Yep.
But that's how we're going to do it.
Yep.
But, or I would start a radio show on KELP and call it 915 Talk and remind people that we're not just broadcasting on 1590 AM, 95.9 FM in El Paso, or streaming worldwide on KELPradio.com or on 89.3 FM in Las Cruces, but we also have the KELP Radio YouTube channel. Yes. We could get millions of views, that right?
Yes.
Wait, right, Mr. Del Norte?
Oh, yeah.
Well, our guest today, I don't think he went out looking to make a huge YouTube channel. I think he just had a crazy idea.
Yep.
But he started logging what was happening on video, and he now has over 200,000 subscribers. And I'll tell you what, that's not impressive just to me. That's impressive to my teenage sons.
Definitely. Yeah, that's very impressive, actually.
Yeah. And he bought a wasteland in the middle of the desert, a giant piece of sand, and I think it was a set for a I don't know, like a war scene in a movie from the Middle East or something like that. And he decided to turn it into something beautiful.
What was that?
Well, we're going to find out.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, because I started looking at it and I was like, oh man, I wrote him. I said, hey, can we talk on the radio? And he's like, yeah, sure. And I was like, well, I want to find out together with the listeners exactly what he's doing, because I watched a few of his YouTube videos and it was like pretty interesting. But today I'm looking forward to learning more. So without further ado, wherever you are, maybe you're driving around Fabens, maybe you're preparing your evening meal up in beautiful Chaparral, or you're driving down I-10 up to Las Cruces, wherever you are. Let's give a very warm borderland welcome to the one, the only, Mr. Shaun Overton. Shaun, welcome to 915 Talk.
That was the most enthusiastic greeting I've had in my life. Thank you.
Well, Shaun, you know, we believe here that we are faith-based radio, and we believe that you are the unique expression of an endlessly creative God. We need to celebrate each other. We need to just look at what other people are doing in the world around us, learn from them, and celebrate them. So looking forward to talking to you, learning about your project. I think the first question I have is why you're doing this, but we're going to get to that later. First, we're going to talk about what you're doing. and start back at the beginning. I need to make sure I got the size right. 340 acres?
320, yes.
320. Not quite as amazing. Okay. 320, 320 acres.
You were this close.
Yeah. Of wasteland. Now, most of our listeners are here in El Paso. This piece of wasteland is south of Van Horn?
It is in between Sierra Blanca and Van Horn, and you have the Eagle Mountains spanning the distance between those two towns. I'm to the south of the mountains, which is next to nothing. There's absolutely nothing out there.
Nothing. Right. I do know that section of the road. Can you see it from the roadway?
No, because if you're driving from Sierra Blanca to Van Horn, on your right side, you'll see the Eagle Mountains. And up top, you'll see this bizarre little white tower.
Okay.
It's an antenna from the FAA for aviation radar. But then on the whole other side of that mountain, there's this big river valley, the Rio Grande, that nobody knows about, nobody visits, and it's hundreds of thousands of acres.
Well, I've been watching the news. I think you have thousands of visitors.
Well, that's been a huge issue up until recently. But when the border was more open, one of the more popular episodes I had was a migrant that he came to me after days in the desert, desperate and very dehydrated, but one in his party had died the night before. And that was one of my very first experiences on my property was a guy in a party of three, and one of them passed away hours previously. That's
horrible.
A very rude awakening.
Sure, that is horrible. Have you? We're not a political talk show, but have you noticed a decrease in unexpected pedestrians in your land?
Yeah, it's fallen off a cliff. I try very hard to not talk about politics too, but being on the border, that issue is kind of, you can't get away from it. It just sort of involves itself in my project, whether I want it to or not.
Right. Okay. So, it's 320 acres. How would you describe this piece of land? Well, I guess to someone in El Paso or to someone who has no idea about this area.
Actually, I think it resonates with El Paso viewers because just like El Paso, where you have the flat area and then you have the Franklin Mountains, mine's pretty similar where I'm on the foothills leading up to the Eagle Mountains. So I think somebody from El Paso would absolutely recognize that type of landscape. Mine's a little different because we're facing the south slope into the river valley. So it's definitely a very harsh section of Hudspeth County, but it's not like Mars to somebody from El Paso. From Fort Worth, it would be much more surprising.
Right. And that's where you are.
Correct. That's the other weird thing about my project is I don't live out there full time. I am doing this part time, which probably not the best idea, but I drive 9 hours from my home in the Fort Worth suburbs out to Hudspeth County, and I'm there for a week every month. But I also have a full-time ranch hand out there that's making the desert forest actually happen.
Wow. So I like it. You're turning Sierra Blanca into a destination city.
I really want to, because you go to Sierra Blanca for the first time and it's really sad. You can tell this town it is not thriving. And so and there's a mix among the residents, whether they want economic development or not. But when you're walking through downtown and it's completely empty and there's broken windows, it's not a good look.
Right. Yeah. I've had the pleasure of visiting Sierra Blanca for my son's football games and so on. And I love the idea of someone seeing the potential of a town rather than just looking at where it is right now.
And it's such a sad history between being New York City's sewage dump and potentially a radio. Did you know about that?
I don't know about this. So I'm new to El Paso, relatively new. So that's what's great about that. So I started a radio show so I could learn what's going on.
Yeah, Sierra Blanca is historically the dumping ground of the United States. So the 90s, the big event was. It was the leading candidate to be the nuclear storage disposal site for the nation, and an underground aquifer saved it because could lead to serious contamination. Also
Sure.
in the 90s, New York City by train imported all of its treated sludge, its sewage, into Sierra Blanca, and it was spread across thousands of acres in the desert. So it's a literal dumping ground.
Is that close to your property?
No, I mean, depends on close. It's West
Yeah.
Texas close, but
Right.
it's probably about 20 miles, maybe a little further from me.
Okay, gotcha. So this piece of land, 320 acres. First of all, how like did you find it on Craigslist? Did you find it on I don't know, homes.com, Realtor, Zillow? Like how do you find out about this kind of property?
Online. I
Online.
found mine on Lands of Texas, but there's a lot of people in that area that buy it on Facebook, similar real estate websites. It's not hard to stumble across the parcels. What is hard to stumble across is accurate listings.
Okay. So how many pieces of property did you look at? Or was it like you just drove past the FAA tower on your four-wheeler on your quad and you saw it and you just heard music in the background and you knew this was the one? Like
Yeah, there's a lot of backstory here. So I had been watching permaculture videos on YouTube for about 10 years, which is this farming method that rather than having intensive annuals, that you want essentially a permanent system. And a lot of that work happens in deserts. So I've had this interest and wanted to pursue it for a long time, but then there was a couple of catalysts. The first was going with a group of friends from church to Big Bend in 2018, and learning about the monsoon rains, and not that they come in the winter, but I mean in the summer, but also the intense erosion in the park.
right.
There's a really famous book called Big Bend. And reading that description after my visit about all the lush grass that used to be across the park, and then me looking at all of these horribly eroded gullies and just seeing the massive damage that water causes there, I realized it just comes all at once. So how do you intelligently make use of this resource that can be overwhelming? And with land prices in that area, I knew whenever I do my project, it's going to be in far West Texas.
So you were in Big Bend and you saw tremendous erosion, which showed you that there is a large amount of rain.
Correct. And the problem with the desert is that it wouldn't be a desert if you got consistent rain. You just go through these long cycles of drought, which my area, we're in exceptional, I think it's extreme drought, whatever the highest category is right now.
What you're saying is that when we drive across West Texas, which is what we do in El Paso anytime we want to go anywhere, that it didn't always look this way?
It's dramatically changed. Big Bend is the extreme example where we have photographic and written documentation about dramatically more grass covering the area. The history of Big Bend was that it was covered in lush grass and it was amazing grazing. Then the First World War happened and cattle prices shot through the roof. It incentivized ranchers to cash in and take short-term profits over long-term land management. What happened was the cattle ate so much grass and put so much pressure on these lands that they couldn't recover. So you have sites in Big Bend that talk about Miss So-and-so wanted to be buried by the cottonwood trees near where the stream flowed. And you read this plaque near the visitor center and you're, where's the stream and where are the cottonwood trees?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And it's completely denuded. It's just in gravel now.
Yes. Yeah, so we're talking about Big Bend here. I guess there's not that historical record in the Sierra Blanca area. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying it's a lot less intact. The best historical record I have for my area is from Cabeza de Vaca, who, do you know that story?
No.
So
Shaun, just so you know, I don't get out of the house much. I don't know.
Well, I don't think most people know about Cabeza de Vaca. He was a Spanish explorer who shipwrecked in Florida, had to figure out how to build another ship, somehow made it all over to Texas with all of his party, lands in South Texas, and goes on this awful 2-year adventure where he walks from the southern coast of Texas up to El Paso del Norte, through northern Mexico, and I think he wound up all the way down in Mexico City is where he finished his journey. And he wound up writing, and this is in the 1540s. He wrote a memoir of, it's about 40 pages documenting his experiences. And there's a really good academic work from the University of Texas called They Came Naked and Barefoot, alluding to a shipwreck. And one of the core chapters is about the stretch between Presidio and Fort Quitman. Historically, that area was occupied by the Humano Indians, and the Spanish called them the Valley of the Cows, cows referencing the buffalo.
Okay.
And buffalo eat grass.
Yes.
And if you've ever been anywhere around Fort Quitman all the way down to Presidio, one thing you've probably not noticed is grass.
Right. No, this is interesting. This is super interesting to me. Now, when we look at grass, there has to be a source of water. Now, as far as I know, there are 3 sources of water. And I'm sure you can speak into this, but one would be a river. You don't have any rivers adjacent or going through your property. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm 6 miles from the Rio Grande.
Okay. Yeah. And probably getting a pipe from the Rio Grande is both cost prohibitive.
Well, and very illegal.
Yeah, very illegal. And there's no water in the Rio Grande most of the time. So the other 2 ways of getting water are from underground or from rainfall. As you mentioned, when the rain comes, we know this in El Paso, it pours, it's a monsoon. So which of those strategies are you pursuing, or maybe it's both?
It's both. However, what I realized in Big Bend is that you don't actually have to have the property where the rain's falling. So if you look at if you look up in the mountains in the Chisos, the ecosystem is way more lush and diverse, and there's oak savanna. And then where you see the erosion is actually from the mountains leading into the flatlands, because that water has there's no vegetation to absorb the rainfall. So what happens is you'll see what used to be a gentle wash becomes a severe gully. And there's places in Big Bend where you drive along the road and you see gullies that are, 30 feet, 50 feet deep, because they just, a river doesn't describe it. It is a raging torrent. And for me, that made me realize when I look for my future property, I don't necessarily want to be in the mountains, but it would be have a property that matches the drainage from the mountains. And that's the reason I selected mine, is because I realized it's in the hills of the east, and up at the peak in Hudspeth County.
Is it Hudspeth County?
Hudspeth. Yeah.
Hudspeth. Okay.
So in Hudspeth County, where I'm located, we have Eagle Mountain, where at the peak, it gets 30 inches of annual rainfall. I don't have to own the summit. What I need to own is the catchment area below it, where it's catching significant rainfall. And then there's opportunities to use some of that water and divert it to where I want to grow things. But there's the theory of it, and then there's the practicality of that approach.
Right. So you intentionally chose a place. What I'm understanding is you chose a place that's at the base of a mountain.
Correct.
Okay. And you're collecting water from Eagle Mountain, 30 inches of rain a year. I actually have no idea. Is that a lot?
It's comparable to Fort Worth. It's like slightly less than Fort Worth.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a decent amount of rain.
Yeah, it's El Paso, for context, gets 9.
Oh, yes. I've noticed. I'm relatively new to El Paso, but I have noticed the lack of rainfall. So how do you collect the rain then? That's coming from the mountain.
So that was part of the theory practicality comment, was the area that I purchased. Even though it's a 320 acre parcel, there is a section in the middle where where the rainoff from Eagle Mountain comes. That's about 33 acres. And I had an excavation company come out to my property to look at the idea of diverting some of that water. And the guy basically looked at me like I was absolutely insane and I'm going to waste a huge pile of money. So the reason I bought that property isn't what I'm actually doing today. I've had to pivot and shift. I do hope eventually to, and not eventually, I mean, sometime later this year, I can readdress the issue, but it's going to have to be a lot more well thought out than when I thought, oh, the water's there, I'll just divert it. It's like,
Right. Okay, so I saw something. So what I did is I went to your YouTube channel, and just for folks out there listening, once you're done listening to 915 Talk, go to YouTube and look for Shaun Overton, SHAUN Overton, OVERTON, and Dustups. Dustups, is that the name of the property?
yeah, it's the name of the ranch. So if you look
Okay.
for Dustups, you're absolutely going to find the channel.
Okay, so that's easier. Dustups, one word.
Correct.
Okay, so look for Dustups. But I saw your beaver dams.
Yeah, so I've had to try all sorts of different water retention strategies. Beaver dam analog was one of them. And for better or worse, people hear beaver dam analog. The idea is to copy what beavers do. And what we do is we drive T-posts into the middle of washes and we weave a bunch of wooden boughs and mud and pretty much anything organic that we can find or that's going to hold water to sit in the middle of the water channel. And our goal with any water retention strategy is if there's flowing water, we want to slow it down as much as possible. I'm not necessarily trying to build the Hoover Dam. I want to actually go in the ground and get it away from the wind and the sun. Because in our area of Texas, if you have surface water, you'll lose up to 7 or 8 feet of water every year to evaporation. So not only do we have to keep the water around, but we've got to get it away from the wind and the sun that's going to steal the water that we do have. And beaver dams are actually a really effective way to get it to where plants can find it instead of just the day it rains, but hopefully weeks and months later.
Okay, so you set up these beaver dams. I saw it on the Dustups YouTube channel. Now you have a monsoon. You're saying the water is still in those pools for months later?
Yes, because you're trying to get it to soak in and bury, right? So in my area, the native soil, it's not even soil, it's dirt. It's a lot of dirt and a lot of rocks. And none of those things are good at holding water. What we're trying to do is build or engineer systems that are going to grab water and hold it as long as possible, which means that you actually want to bury the water. You want to keep it where plants are expecting to find it and where they drink it, which is in the roots. So the better job I do keeping water in the root zone as long as possible, I mean, up to a point, but the longer the water sticks around where the roots can find it, the more vegetation and the more growth I'm going to accomplish.
Wow. Okay. So you're talking about these different strategies other than beaver dams. What other strategies have you tried? What has been successful? What has maybe not been had the success that you were hoping for?
Yeah. So I started dirt bathtubs, which is literally it's a rectangular hole in the ground. And there's no doubt that that's going to work over the long run because there's a lot more water in that spot than there was before I dug the holes. But I'm in the worst drought category that we have. So that system will work once it rains, but obviously it depends entirely on the rain occurring. So that doesn't make for exciting YouTube viewing if you just dig holes for 2 years until the rain shows up.
Well, let me ask you about that. Was I right at the beginning of the program when I said you didn't start off trying to make a YouTube channel? You started off just with this passion project, and you were surprised when it had that level of interest, or?
Yeah, I was astonished because when I bought the property, I was kind of had like a professional PTSD where I worked in software and was just completely burned out and needed to do something different. And it wasn't until a month or two later, I was watching YouTube and I saw this channel, Ghost Town Living, where this guy bought a ghost town in the middle of the California desert. And it's really dramatic and it involves these desert mountains. And he's got a lot of these beautiful drone shots. And I was just watching and thinking, that looks exactly like the property I just bought.
Love it. So you just started filming.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, clearly there's this appetite on YouTube for desert living with an adventure and a sense of purpose. And looking at his channel, which is kind of historic nostalgia, I realized my desert forest project has its own angle, but still taps into that same emotion. So I thought, yeah, like this is going to be amazing YouTube viewing. And within, I don't even remember, it was within days, we were over 1 million views on the first episode.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. So I don't know which is more difficult though, buying 320 acres outside of Sierra Blanca and trying to turn it into a forest, or renting a chopper and jumping into a pool of jello like I recommended. But I, I love that. I love that. I saw one of your videos has 4.3 million views. It's called "I Bought a Wasteland to Turn It into a Desert Forest." And you know, you said there's a sense of purpose. I think people do latch onto that.
For
Probably
sure.
there's a sense of let's watch this insanity. This is
Yeah,
very entertaining.
no doubt.
Because there's videos I saw of you getting stuck in the desert. Just all the not everything you do is working out the way that you hoped. And
To say the least.
yeah, and for someone sitting on their couch, you know, just eating some chips and enjoying the end of their day, it's very relaxing to watch someone out in the middle of the desert
Exactly. Like you
trying to
can have
make a go of it.
yeah, you can have the adventure without actually getting sweaty or dirty.
Right. Love it. Yeah. So, you were talking about dirt bathtubs. We're talking about beaver dams. Uh, is it possible to dig a well down, or is
Yeah,
it just oh, okay. How
it
deep do
is.
you have to go?
Well, so the conventional driller said if I absolutely need to stop if I get to 600 feet and don't find anything.
Okay.
I hired a water survey company where a lot of people with science backgrounds are skeptical. However, I believe what this guy's saying is true. And he thinks I'll find water at 200 feet,
Okay.
but it's, and it's not like a crazy budget item. It's more just really thinking through what I'm doing before I do it. And it kind of drives viewers nuts because I don't just like dive in and say, oh, I'm going to dig dirt bathtubs and then just start making a mess of the desert. I'm trying to, because you can absolutely make a mess and destroy everything and create a horrible problem. I've had a lot of people out to the property with all sorts of different backgrounds, whether they're civil engineers or ranchers or ecological restoration folks, and they all say the same thing, that there's no doubt that digging holes in the sand is going to lead to water collecting there and more plants to grow. But it's not especially interesting to watch me do that for years on end until it rains. So what I did was I switched my approach to something called, well, it's a mix of things. The first is that I have a bulldozer now, and that's a core
Okay.
part of the channel that I have no blue collar manual labor experience whatsoever. I've always been in software engineering or services. I've sat at a desk my entire life, which is a big part of the reason that I'm doing this project. But you can imagine what it's like when you don't know, you start the project and you don't even know how to put your truck into four-wheel drive, and then now you have a bulldozer breakdown in the middle of the desert and you're 40 miles from Sierra Blanca, and nobody wants to come help you because, like, I don't need to go that far for work. Like, why do I want to come help you? And I have to figure out how to fix my own problems in a very, very public way, which is really entertaining for folks. And the reason I have that bulldozer is because I have the slopes are pretty severe. It's all hills, but it's a 23% grade where I'm working. And what I
Wow.
do is I make terraces into the side of the hill so that there's these 20 to 25-foot wide flat spots where water can rain just a little higher and then slide down the slope and collect on my terrace where I'm doing all the work, whether it's adding clay or biochar, horse manure, everything I can pile there that's going to cover the soil and soak water, I'm doing. And the other thing I'm doing is now I am irrigating because my neighbor has a well but again, West Texas close. That well's 3.5 miles from me, but delighted to have it because that's a lot closer than the water in Sierra Blanca that's 40 miles away.
Right.
So that's close enough that I was able to go down to that well and haul water that I need to do the irrigating. Because we only used maybe 3,000 or 4,000 gallons of water last year. It's really not that much. We're extremely careful with every drop. And what that allowed me to do was to start a syntropic agroforestry approach, which is this really high density approach of having 42 different species of trees and shrubs and grasses all mixed together, trying to get as much vertical space occupied as I can, whether it's just grass growing on the ground or a 20-foot tall tree. We want everything growing in ultra high density because they all feed off each other.
Wow. I mean, this has been, Shaun, I have a problem. This has been so interesting that I forgot to take a break. We're going to take a break right now. We're going to get back with Shaun Overton, Dustups, turning the wasteland into a forest. Do not touch that dial.
We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial.
915 Talk is listener supported. If you believe that local Christian talk radio is important to our community, please take a moment to prayerfully consider taking part. For all donation options, including secure online giving, visit kelpradio.com and click on the Cornerstone Broadcasting link. Let's reach our neighbors in the borderland together.
Are you looking for a Bible teaching church on the west side of El Paso? This is Terry Gray, pastor of Calvary Chapel Sun City and speaker on the Summons broadcast heard each weekday at 5 p.m. here on this station. Calvary Chapel Sun City is located at 960 West Borderland Road on the west side of El Paso. We hold services on Wednesday evenings at 7 and on Sunday mornings at 9 and 11. You can find out more information about us on the web at www.ccsuncity.org. The Lord bless you, my friends.
We're back. You're listening to 915 Talk.
And we're back. Just a reminder to those who might just be tuning in. We are with Shaun Overton, the Dustups YouTube channel, more than 200,000 subscribers. He's has 320 acres just between Sierra Blanca and Van Horn, and he's turning the wasteland into a desert forest. And just so much to unpack here. Just do want to thank our impact partners, especially Caring Companions. If you have elderly relatives, you can have them taken care of at home, and that's a great way to do it. Check out Caring Companions here in El Paso. Also, if you are driving a bulldozer outside of Sierra Blanca and you get a chip or crack on your windshield, be sure to check out alamoglasspros.com. Good people out there. And but they do window tinting, which would also be helpful if you have a wasteland. You're turning into a forest. Before it turns into a forest, you might want some tinting on those windows. Reach out to alamoglasspros.com. Shaun, there is so many parts to this. You were just talking about how the grass affects the trees, and I'm sure there's all these things with erosion. We've been talking about dirt bathtubs, which are not exciting on YouTube, but are super exciting for the future generations who are going to enjoy this forest. But I had the thought, if they're hard to just make exciting, you might consider a live stream of the dirt bathtub. A 20-year live stream. But tell me, paint a picture for me how you picture this land when the project has reached its goal. What does it look like?
So it's not going to be a forest in the conventional sense that there is a complete spread of trees all the way through the property. Instead, you'll see lines of trees. Where I'm putting all my effort is into the terraces, where I'm adding so many soil amendments, trying to capture water, because we need to keep the water around, but also because the areas where I'm focusing right now, I don't have the opportunity to divert water from elsewhere. So I have to maximize all of it, grabbing and storing as much rainwater as possible. And the way to do that, it will soak up water has to go in one spot. And it also means increasing the catchment area. My property on average will get 12 to 14 inches of rainfall because we're a little higher elevation. But when it rains, it's probably not enough on its own just in that little spot to grow things. So I have to use the elevation as like a big rain roof to bring the water to where I want it. So if you kind of like, this is overly simplified by far, but imagine that you need 5 acres worth of rain catching to grow 1 acre of trees, right? If you have a slope and you catch all of that water and you bring it into one spot, you 5x rainfall. I mean, that's dramatically oversimplified, but that's the idea is you increase the area and you bring all the water to one spot, and that's where the forest goes. And I'm trying to do that on a much smaller scale where I bring water from these areas and then there's a strip of trees where all that water is condensed and concentrated, and you'll just be able, you see a row of trees going down all the terraces that we're building.
So that's interesting. How do you picture yourself 20 years from now? What I mean, like, is this like a personal journey as well?
Well, it's
Like,
absolutely a personal journey because it's all a story of personal growth. That, like, I come from a software background where the ethos is go fast and break things, and that approach is completely wrong for the desert. So in software, especially if you're launching it as a business, you're just trying to fail as quickly as possible. But in the desert, the pressures are different. That, like, I would approach the project trying to find, like, what's the bare minimum that I need to do to succeed and then move on? Like, how do I cover the biggest area possible with the least amount of expenditure? And a lot of this 2-year journey so far has been realizing that that is just completely backwards, that I need to start on crushing it in this one tiny little spot and proving that I can collect the water, that I can run the irrigation systems, that I can add the right soil amendments, that I can get the seeds to germinate, right? Like, just go 1,000% overboard in this one spot and prove that you're going to make it work. And then you can worry about scaling. And whether that's just my philosophical approach or me having to learn specific skills, like, yeah, now I can maintain my bulldozer. Right? Like, I've learned the hard way. It's been very painful, but having to, oh, and also I've had to learn how to run a YouTube channel all at the same time. Like, I'm completely thrown into the deep end of all these new skill sets all at the same time, which is really fun for me, but very difficult.
Right. Yeah, I can only imagine. So you mentioned a lot of people have come out and looked at the property, experts in their field. Do you enjoy those interactions, or do you picture yourself more as a hermit? Kind of there by yourself. Kind of what I'm getting at is there's people who are listening to this right now, and maybe they would just be interested in coming out and do something if they're an expert in a certain field. Is there something you're looking for, or where are you at with that?
My property is an hour and 45 minutes down a dirt road. And what I found is that if somebody's willing to drive that far to meet a dude that they've never met and only know from YouTube, it's been the best people filter ever. I've never had a bad experience with somebody coming out to my property because it's really hard. Like, it's doable. Like, it's insane. But I had a young man from Germany rent a Kia Soul and drive it through the canyon and all these horrible roads. And it was a rental all the way to their property. And it was great. I love meeting a young man from Germany having a life experience backpacking through the United States, or a retired aviation tech who has a cactus growing hobby part-time and came out and helped me plant cactus last month. So it's just, I get to meet people from all walks of life, all over the world, and we meet in the most unlikely spot that you can imagine. And it's fun.
Right. What you're getting at is you're not concerned about competing with Disney World.
No, no,
It's a certain type of person who does make that journey. I mean, I'll say
100%.
that's absolutely true. We're here in El Paso, and Mac Daddy and I are really enjoying listening to you. We're not that far away, but we're still not convinced we're ever going to come out. But we will definitely watch the YouTube videos. So if someone was interested in so I understand you do go out for 1 week a month, first of all.
I do.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yes.
if someone wanted to go out there, maybe do some work, I don't know, maybe they have some level of expertise in desert restoration. How would they find you?
The easiest is probably on Instagram. It's Dustups,
Okay.
but with an underscore between dust and ups. Or
Okay.
they can just email me at Shaun@dustupsranch.com.
Okay. We'll put those links on the webpage for those people who are looking. Those people who are as thoughtful and crazy as you are. It's a
You
great
notice I'm
mix.
not arguing.
I love it. I love it. So we talked about type water. What types of plants are growing in the desert?
Natively or what I'm adding?
Yeah, what you're adding, I guess. Natively, there's not a whole lot growing. I don't
You know, you'd
think.
be surprised. So that's the thing I didn't appreciate is I not living in a desert and then coming out to far west Texas, everything looks like a cactus. And then there's not much more than that.
Right.
And then over time realizing that, oh, like there's a whole bunch of different types of cacti. And then over time, like my property has quite a bit of grass on it. I just, I'm
Mhm.
used to seeing turf grass in Fort Worth, not desert grass. And so for the longest time, I didn't even realize that I had grass on the property, or what an ocotillo was, or candelia, or ephedra. Like there's all these amazing plants growing all over the place natively. And so that was the first insight, was that there is a meaningful amount of vegetation on the property. But then the second was the way things grow. So I always had this idea that you just spread some seeds and stuff grows, and it's just not the way things work. That now that I've been out there so much, you notice a lot more detail, like this creosote doesn't grow by itself. This creosote has a patch of prickly pear growing under it. And then underneath the prickly pear is a stand of grama grass. And maybe there's an ocotillo a couple feet from it. So, like these plants, they all support each other and form these micro plant communities where
Uh-huh.
one can't really thrive without the other. And it's been that experience of how can I learn what's sort of working out there and then bring it up, because it's whether some people don't like the fact that I'm working in the desert, but in my mind, that's just a difference in values. That my value is maximizing abundance.
Hmm.
You mentioned this is a faith-based show, so like for me, my faith is a critical part of it, and I believe that we're stewards of the earth and we're called to maximize abundance in a way that respects God's creation.
I
And
love that.
I want to bring the desert to its full potential. It's never going to be the Amazon rainforest. I can't make it rain, but I can do as much as possible with the rain that does come. And that means starting with desert appropriate trees. So that could be the honey mesquite growing lower in the valley, giving it a chance to really get established so it can get up and provide shade. And using the Palo Verde that's growing all over El Paso, that's another key species I'm using. Testing Huisache. It's not really about finding the magic tree. We want a diversity of species, like helping, supporting, and growing each other. Those happen to be the taller ones, but um, they're the cornerstone that give the lower species, like the grasses and the cacti, the shrubs, the opportunity to have less pressure from the sun so they can get established and take the environment from, okay, there's a tree growing, to, wow, we have a proper understory from the soil all the way to the tree canopy.
I love it. I love the idea of stewarding God's creation. I love the your phrase, let's bring the desert to its full potential. And for someone living in El Paso, I guess the other thing that kind of resonates is you talked a little bit earlier about focusing everything on one little spot. And most of us in El Paso don't have large yards, and it's a similar, of course, climate, very close. Of course, we're just right here around the corner from Sierra Blanca. But how could we, for those of us who have these little backyards, how could we focus on those, make something beautiful, learn a little bit about God's creation on the way? Just like you said, you didn't know about all these plants, and I'm new to the desert as well. I'm learning about plants for my yard, and that's a project my wife and I work on. We don't have, sadly, we do not have 320 acres of wasteland. but it is always a fun project to figure these things out, and making our own little plots beautiful, making the city a little bit more beautiful, one plot of land at a time, one house at a time. I mean, that's very inspirational.
Yeah, I think there's so many principles that can apply in the suburbs or even in El Paso itself. The biggest opportunity is the fact that everybody has a roof.
Hmm.
So if you think about storm management in El Paso, it's always the infrastructure is always breaking because the whole city is just paved over, right? Like it's just a big
Yeah.
concrete jungle where all this water lands, it has nowhere to go, and then it goes in through the storm water management system and it gets overwhelmed constantly.
Right.
So the best thing you can do is to make your yard beautiful and take pressure off of the city infrastructure by trapping as much of the water on your little section, even if it's a 0.05 acres with a side yard this big. All that water is landing on your roof, so do something with it. Instead of just
Right.
sending it into the street and making it the city's problem, you can get it into your soil where it can do some good. And
Right.
there's a lot of resources available for free all across El Paso that you can take advantage of. The main one being the city dump. They have a couple of sites located throughout El Paso where you can drive up with a pickup truck and a shovel and fill your pickup full of free wood chips.
Oh,
And if you
wow.
do something simple like just put wood chips all over your yard, right? Get all that sands and gravel covered up just so that you got something organic on the surface to absorb water. And there's not, practically speaking, there's not anything, there's no level that's too much, right? Like
Mhm.
if you can put a foot of wood chips down, that'll degrade over time into just a couple inches of topsoil. As long as you don't put it too close to your house and invite pests and insects and you keep an appropriate distance from the walls, that by itself is already going to lead to a lot more water storing in your soil. Uh, and then other things like going to local coffee shops and asking them for their extra coffee grounds. Like Starbucks gives away coffee grounds for free. So if you want to go do a favor to them and take away their trash and put it in your yard where you can grow tomatoes, or even better, in my opinion, nopales or something that's appropriate for the climate, you can make your yard beautiful. And if you really focus on where the water flowing from your house comes from, you can grow big, beautiful trees. El Paso, I'm sure you noticed, it's hot.
Yes,
How
I
much
did
good
notice.
would it how much good would it do if we had trees with actual canopies here? So an oak tree on its own isn't going to thrive in El Paso, but if you take your entire roof and you use that water to grow a big oak tree in your front yard, that you actually do, and you pick the right type of oak, you do get enough water here to plausibly grow a tree like that. So you can
Right.
have big, beautiful canopies that serve not only your house, but your community. Like you can do things to lower the temperature of your street. Now it's just your little island, but if you get a community of people doing this, you can make the climate in El Paso a lot more habitable with something simple like shade, natural shade.
Right. Yeah, my little project, not nearly as cool as an oak tree. I do have kind of like a mesquite tree, and I feel like it's
Yeah,
gold in El Paso. But
it is.
in my backyard, I have a pomelo, and we had a bumper crop of 2 pomelos last year. They were delicious, the 2 pomelos. And then my wife and I went to a nursery, and they had a deal. It was like a plum tree was like $30, and an apple tree was like 35. And we just planted them, and we're like, let's just see if we can make them grow. You know,
Yeah.
it's not as cool as your project, but it's our little project.
So I love the fact that you're growing mesquite because that is something that can thrive. Like that is a tree that clearly does well in our area of Texas. And
Right.
did you know you can eat mesquite?
Like the little pods.
Yeah, that if you grind it into flour, have you ever tried it before?
Uh, so, well, I feel like I'm doing a confessional right now. Sometimes I take walks to Memorial Park. I live in central El Paso, and you can kind of just take out the pods off the trees and kind of suck on them, and they're sweet. So I've done that a few times. I feel
Okay.
like I'm saying something that's really strange, but but I do know that there is some kind of some kind of nutritional value there.
Yeah, there is for sure. Once the pods dry, you can actually dry them and ground them into flour, and it makes
Okay,
this phenomenal dessert flour. Like it tastes
okay.
almost like cinnamon.
Okay. I'll try that in my front yard. I don't think the city would appreciate if I was harvesting mesquite pods at the Memorial Park. but no, I love all of this. I do believe that our listeners, we the church need to celebrate the desert that we live in. We need to be caretakers of God's creation. You have taken this to a level that hopefully will be an inspiration to many others. Uh, and you are walking that tightrope between true life purpose and insanity, and I just want to say we all love it. We love it. And just a reminder to our listeners, the YouTube channel is called Dustups, and it's great viewing this evening as you get home. Just pull that up on YouTube. Dustups. Watch Shaun try to get manure out of a trailer. Watch him watch him get his truck stuck multiple times. Watch him try to capture water in a wasteland, and then you'll be inspired to at least go in your front yard and plant a few plants, clean it up, go to the dump, like he said, get some wood chips. But all of these things, at the end of this program, what I usually say is, let's learn to love our city, love our neighbors, and give God all the glory. But what I would say today is, let's learn to love the desert. Let's learn to love the place that we live. Shaun, any final thoughts on all of this?
No, amen to what you said. I agree.
All right. Well, thanks again, Shaun, for coming in. This has been super fun. Let's learn to love the desert, love our neighbors, and give God all the glory. This has been 915 Talk. You have been listening to 915 Talk on KELP Christian Radio. To listen to past recordings of 915 Talk, just visit KELPradio.com and click on the 915 Talk link. Until next time, love your neighbor, love your city, and give God all the glory.